The bar pulsed with its usual Friday night rhythm, a mix of chatter, laughter, and the metallic twang of a country guitar drifting from the jukebox in the corner. Neon signs buzzed above the bar counter, throwing a glow of red and green across faces half tired, half determined to forget the week. The smell of fried food clung to the air, mixing with the musk of beer and cigarette smoke that seemed soaked into the wood itself after decades of nights just like this. Regulars sat in their usual places, an old man nursing his whiskey by the window, a group of mechanics loud at the pool table, a couple tucked away in the shadows of a booth. For most, this was routine. But routine always had a way of shattering when Rex and his crew rode in. The doors swung wide, and in they came, 4 bikers clad in black leather, boots heavy on the wooden floorboards. Rex led the pack, his presence filling the space before he even spoke a word. He wasn't just big, he carried himself like a man who wanted everyone to know it, shoulders squared, jaw tight, and a grin that never reached his eyes. The sound of their arrival silenced the jukebox for a heartbeat, as if even the music hesitated. Some patrons glanced their way, others pretended not to notice, but no one was unaware of them. Rex and his gang had a reputation: rowdy, mean-spirited, and dangerous when crossed. They claimed their usual spot at the center of the room, dragging chairs out with a screech that made a waitress flinch as she passed. Laughter erupted as Rex clapped one of his men on the back, the noise deliberately loud, meant to demand attention. The waitress at the bar exchanged a nervous glance with Emma, the newest one on the shift. Emma wasn't the kind of girl who sought attention. She moved quietly through the room, her tray balanced with practiced ease, her eyes kept down to avoid trouble. Her auburn hair was tied back, her apron crisp, though the long shift had left her shoulders aching. She had heard stories about Rex but hadn't served him yet, not directly. Tonight would change that. "Hey, sweetheart," one of the bikers barked, waving her over. His tone carried no kindness, only the sharp edge of command. Emma hesitated, then drew in a breath and approached their table. She carried a notepad, though she could have recited the drinks list by heart. Rex leaned back in his chair, eyes running over her with the kind of look that made her skin crawl. His grin spread wider, the corners of his mouth curling with cruel amusement. "What'll it be?" Emma asked softly, her voice polite, measured. "Beer. Cold," Rex said, his voice gravelly, almost mocking. "And make it quick, we're thirsty." His men chuckled, nudging each other. Emma scribbled the order and turned to leave, but Rex's hand shot out, brushing against her wrist just long enough to make her pause. "Hold on," he said, tilting his head. "What's your name?" "Emma," she replied, keeping her tone even though her heart thudded uncomfortably. "Emma," Rex repeated, rolling the name over his tongue like he was tasting it. "Pretty name, pretty girl," his companion snickered. Emma slipped her hand free, muttering that she'd be right back, and disappeared behind the counter. She could feel their eyes following her, heat crawling up the back of her neck. When she returned with their drinks, she placed the bottles one by one in front of them, careful not to linger. Rex waited until the last one touched the table before making his move. With sudden, startling force, he reached forward and grabbed the edge of her shirt, yanking at it with a roughness that sent buttons scattering to the floor. The sound of tearing fabric cut through the music, cut through the laughter, cut through every conversation in the room. Emma gasped, stumbling backward, clutching at the torn fabric, her breath caught in her throat. The bar fell into silence so thick it was almost tangible. A glass clinked as someone set it down too hard, but no one spoke. Forks hovered above plates, cards froze mid-game, the hum of chatter evaporated into nothing. Even the jukebox seemed to falter, the music fading into background noise no one heard. Every pair of eyes turned to Emma, then to Rex, then back again. Rex leaned back in his chair, grinning with satisfaction, waiting for the laughter from his gang to follow. But the laughter didn't come. Not right away. The men around him shifted in their seats, their smirks hesitating as if they sensed something wasn't right. Emma's wide eyes shone with more than shock. There was fire in them, something deeper that none of them expected. Rex opened his mouth to jeer, to toss another insult into the silence, but the weight of the room pressed down on him, reminding him he had just crossed a line. And yet, he didn't know just how far that line extended, or what he had just revealed to everyone watching. Do you want me to expand scene 2 next to 700 words in the same detailed style? Emma's hands trembled as she clutched the torn fabric against her chest, the cotton hanging in tatters like a wound across her body. The cold air of the bar brushed against her exposed skin, but the chill that swept the room wasn't from the draft, it came from the silence. Dozens of eyes locked on her, every face frozen in stunned disbelief. She wanted to disappear, to sink through the floorboards, but her instincts forced her to stand tall, even as her breath shook. And that was when they saw it, what Rex had accidentally exposed. The ink spread across her collarbone and shoulder like a banner, bold and unmistakable. It wasn't a delicate flower, a heart, or a name etched for romance. It was a military insignia, black and precise, the mark of a unit whose story was whispered by veterans and etched into the history of the town. A symbol of courage, sacrifice, and blood. Those who knew it recognized it instantly. The tattoo wasn't just a symbol, it was an inheritance, a mark worn by those who carried the weight of someone else's legacy. At the corner table, an old veteran named Hank froze with his whiskey halfway to his lips. His weathered hand trembled as recognition struck him like a hammer. He had seen that insignia on the arm of a man decades ago, in the thick of battle, halfway across the world. He set the glass down slowly, his jaw tightening, his eyes locked on Emma. Around him, other older patrons stirred in their seats, faces paling as if ghosts from their past had suddenly walked through the bar. "What the hell?" one of the bikers muttered under his breath, the bravado draining from his tone. He didn't laugh like Rex expected. He didn't even smirk. He looked uneasy, shifting in his chair, glancing at the others for reassurance that didn't come. Rex, still grinning, hadn't realized what he'd just revealed. He looked around at his gang, waiting for them to join in his cruel amusement, but their expressions weren't mocking anymore. They were cautious, confused, some even nervous. His grin faltered for the first time that night. "What?" he snapped, voice sharp. "It's just a tattoo." But to the people in that bar, it wasn't just a tattoo. Emma's chest heaved as she pulled her shirt tighter around her, but she didn't cover the ink. She couldn't hide it now, and she wouldn't. Her eyes flickered across the room, and in every gaze she found recognition. Some eyes softened, others hardened, but none looked away. For the first time all night, she wasn't invisible. She was standing in the shadow of a name that still carried weight, still commanded respect. From the corner, Hank's voice broke the silence. It wasn't loud, but it carried like a gunshot. "That's John Carter's girl." The words slammed into the room like thunder rolling through the walls. John Carter, a name that stirred memories. A soldier who had grown up in this town, left as a young man, and never returned the same. A man who had saved lives overseas, who had thrown himself into danger so others could come home. A man whose death had been honored with flags at half-mast and parades of silence, a man etched into the fabric of their collective memory. His daughter stood here now, shamed and trembling because of a cruel act by a stranger who had no idea what name he had just dragged into his game. The bikers shifted uneasily, their earlier bravado crumbling beneath the weight of the revelation. They weren't locals, they didn't understand, not yet. But they could feel it, the atmosphere had shifted, and they were no longer the most dangerous men in the room. Emma's face burned red, not with embarrassment, but with fury. Her father's name had been spoken, his shadow cast across the bar. She hadn't wanted to carry that weight so publicly, hadn't wanted to be defined by it, but tonight it gave her strength. She stood straighter, letting the torn shirt fall slightly from her shoulder, the insignia visible for all to see. If Rex thought he'd broken her, he was wrong. "You think this is funny?" she said, her voice low, steady, and laced with steel. It wasn't a shout, but it didn't need to be. The whole bar heard her. Her question wasn't just for Rex, it was for anyone who thought they could mock her, diminish her, reduce her to nothing. Rex blinked, caught off guard. The grin was gone now, replaced with irritation masking uncertainty. He opened his mouth to retort, but the room itself seemed to push back against him. The stares weren't on Emma anymore, they were on him. Dozens of eyes pinned him in place, not with fear, but with fury. He had gone too far, and though he didn't yet grasp it, he had trespassed on sacred ground. The jukebox droned on with a slow ballad, but no one listened. The only sound was the creak of Hank's chair as he pushed himself to his feet. His voice came again, louder this time, as he faced Rex directly. "You don't touch her. Not her. Not John Carter's daughter." The air thickened, charged with unspoken electricity. Rex's companions shifted uncomfortably, their confidence splintering. Emma held her ground, eyes locked on Rex, her father's legacy burning in every line of her stance. The balance of power had shifted, and Rex was too stubborn, or too blind, to see that the room was no longer his. Would you like me to expand scene 3 next with the same 700-word style, building up to the climax where the bikers are forced out? Hank's words cracked through the air like a whip, and for a long moment, no one moved. The bar seemed suspended in time, every patron holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Emma stood in the center of it all, the torn fabric of her shirt still gathered in her hands, the military insignia on her shoulder bared like a banner. Her pulse roared in her ears, but she refused to look away from Rex. His smirk had disappeared completely now, replaced by something tauter, something that hinted at unease. His hand twitched against the table, and for the first time all night, his swagger seemed less like confidence and more like armor that had begun to crack. Hank's boots thudded heavily as he stepped forward. Though age bent his back and slowed his movements, there was fire in his eyes that not even the years could dim. He jabbed a finger toward Emma, his voice rising, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. Her father bled for this country. Bled for men like you who couldn't carry his boots. You dishonor his memory when you lay a hand on her. The words hit harder than fists. A murmur rippled through the crowd, low at first, then swelling. Men who had been sitting in silence rose from their chairs. The pool players set down their cues. Even the bartender stepped out from behind the counter, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression grim. The bar had transformed. It was no longer just a place for beer and music, it was a courtroom, and Rex stood accused in front of the whole town. Rex tried to laugh, but the sound rang hollow, brittle. Come on, he sneered, looking around for support from his crew. You're all really going to get worked up over a tattoo? Over a dead man? The room erupted with sharp voices at once, a storm of outrage. Watch your mouth, someone barked. You don't speak his name like that, shouted another. The clamor pressed in from all sides, suffocating, hostile. Rex's companions shifted in their seats, their eyes darting nervously around the room. They weren't fools, they could see the tide had turned. This wasn't just a bar fight waiting to happen. This was the wrath of an entire community, and no gang of four could stand against it. Emma, still trembling but resolute, drew in a deep breath. Her voice, though softer than the men's, cut through the noise. You think tearing my shirt makes you strong. You think humiliating me gives you power. You don't know strength. She let the words hang for a beat, her gaze steady. My father taught me that real strength is sacrifice. It's protecting people, not hurting them. That's something you'll never understand. The silence that followed was deafening. Rex's jaw clenched. He shifted as though to rise, but the sudden scrape of a dozen chairs warned him not to. All around, men stood shoulder to shoulder, their expressions united in grim defiance. Hank hadn't moved closer, but he didn't need to. His presence, his voice, and his memory of Emma's father had already rallied the room. You've got two choices, boy, Hank said, his tone low but unyielding. You walk out that door right now, or we carry you out. Rex looked at his crew, but their eyes avoided his. One of them muttered, let's go, Rex. Another nodded, already pushing his chair back. The bravado that had carried them through countless nights of intimidation had evaporated, leaving only the heavy realization that they had picked the wrong place, the wrong woman, and the wrong night to test their cruelty. Rex cursed under his breath, his face flushing red with a mix of rage and humiliation. He shoved his chair back with unnecessary force, the legs screeching against the floor. Fine, he spat, his voice dripping venom. This dump ain't worth it anyway. He motioned to his crew, and they shuffled toward the door, their boots suddenly not so heavy, their shoulders not so broad. The entire bar watched, eyes unblinking, until the door slammed shut behind them and the rumble of their motorcycles faded into the night. Only then did the tension release, the room exhaling as one. A few people clapped Emma on the shoulder as they passed, quiet gestures of solidarity. Others whispered John Carter's name with reverence, as if his spirit had been present in the room, watching over his daughter. Emma stood rooted, the adrenaline leaving her body in waves. Her torn shirt hung loose, the insignia still visible, but she no longer tried to hide it. For the first time, she didn't feel ashamed of the tattoo that marked her. She felt proud. It wasn't just her father's story, it was hers too. She had faced humiliation, cruelty, and danger, and she had not broken. Hank stepped closer, his eyes softening as he placed a hand on her shoulder. Your father would be proud tonight, he said. Quietly, Emma swallowed hard, her eyes stinging, but she nodded. The bar slowly returned to life, though the energy had changed. Conversations resumed, drinks were poured, but the memory of what had just happened lingered like a shadow and a light at the same time. People would remember this night, the night John Carter's daughter stood tall against a bully, and the whole bar stood with her. Would you like me to now create image prompts for all 3 scenes like I've done in some of your other story requests?